Performance preferences. Performance preferences. What about performance preferences? Adjust the allocated memory. We have many performance preferences like adjust the allocated memory. And the second one, limit history states. Limit history states. And second one, manage scratch disks. And next, the efficiency indicator. And adjust cache levels. And set GPU settings. And recovery and background save options. Photoshop, by the way, provides a set of preferences. Preferences and select performance to help you make optimum use of your computer's resources, such as memory and cache and graphics processor, displays, and depending on your primary use cache for using Photoshop and the types of documents you generally work with. Different combinations of this setting may suit you. And additional settings such as scratch disks available on other tabs of the preferences dialog and may also directly impact your computer's running speed and stability, like this screenshot now. Preferences, and you will choose performance, and you will appear for you memory usage and graphics processor setting and history and cache. And adjust how to adjust the memory allocated to Photoshop. How to adjust the memory allocated to Photoshop. You can improve performance by increasing the amount of memory and RAM allocated to Photoshop, and the memory usage area of the performance preferences screen. Preferences, then select performance, tells you how much RAM is available to Photoshop, and it also shows the ideal Photoshop memory allocation range for your system. By default, Photoshop uses 70% of available RAM. And increase the RAM allocated to Photoshop by changing the value in the Let Photoshop Use box. Alternatively, adjust the memory usage slider. And restart Photoshop to enable your changes. To find the ideal RAM allocation for your system, change it in 5% increments and monitor performance in the efficiency indicator. And we don't recommend it, by the way. We don't recommend allocating more than 85% of your computer's memory to Photoshop, and doing so may affect performance by leaving no memory for other essential system applications. Note and be careful. If you experience out of RAM or out of memory errors in Photoshop, try increasing the amount of RAM allocated to Photoshop. However, setting the RAM allocation for Photoshop too high, greater than 85%, and could affect the performance of other running applications and making your system unstable. And the best solution to this issue is to add more RAM to your computer, by the way. So what about adjust cache? Adjust cache levels. Adjust cache levels is meaning cache basics. Photoshop uses image caching to speed up the redrawing of high resolution documents while you are working on them. And you can specify up to 8 levels of cached image data and choose one of the 4 available cache tile sizes. And increasing cache levels improves Photoshop responsiveness while you work, and also images may take longer to load, and the cache tile size determines the amount of data on which Photoshop operates at a time, and bigger tile sizes speed up complex operations such as sharpening filters and smaller changes such as brush strokes, and are more responsive with smaller tile sizes. And so what about cache presets? Cache presets is meaning 3 cache presets are available in the performance preferences, and choose the one that matches your primary use and cache purpose of using Photoshop. And so what about what's meaning web UI design? Web and UI design is meaning choose this option if you use Photoshop primarily for web and applications or screen design. This option, by the way, is appropriate for documents having numerous layers of low to medium pixel dimension assets. So what's the meaning of default and photo? Default and photo is meaning choose this option if you use Photoshop primarily to retouch or edit moderate sized images. For example, use this option if you normally edit photos originating from your mobile or digital camera in Photoshop. And so what's the meaning huge pixel dimensions? Choose this option if you work extensively with heavy documents in Photoshop, for example, panoramas and matte painting, etc. So what about cache levels? Cache levels is meaning for finer control. Specify cache levels manually, and the default value is 4. And if you use relatively small files, roughly 1 megapixel or 1280 by 1024 pixels, and many layers 50 or more, set cache levels or 1 or 2. Setting cache levels to 1 disables image caching, and only the current screen image is cached, by the way. And if you use files with larger pixel dimensions, say 50 megapixels or larger, and set cache levels higher than 4, and higher cache levels speed up redrawing. Note again and be careful. You may not get high quality results with some Photoshop features if you set cache levels to 1. So what about limit history states? Limit history states is meaning you can save, scratch disk space and improve performance by limiting or reducing the number of history states, and Photoshop saves in the history panel, and the amount of space you save varies depending on how many pixels on operation changes. And for example, a history state based on a small paint stroke or a non-destructive operation such as creating or modifying an adjustment layer, and consumes little space, and applying a filter to an entire image, and on the other hand consumes much more space. And Photoshop can save up 1000 history states, and the default number is 20. To reduce that number, go to the performance preference dialog box and choose history and cache, then select history states. In the history states pop-up menu, if necessary, drag the setting to a lower value. So what about set graphics processor GPU setting? Set graphic processor GPU settings, and the best way to optimize GPU acceleration, which speeds up screen redraws, and is to keep your video adapter driver up to date. For more information about GPU acceleration and instructions on updating video adapter drivers, see Photoshop GPU and video card FAQ. And link turning on OpenCL, a technology that lets applications use the GPU, is likely to improve performance if you use these Photoshop features: video panorama and blur gallery, and erase field and titled shift blur. To turn on OpenCL in the performance preferences panel, click advanced setting and select use OpenCL. So what's the meaning of GPU preferences? What is the GPU preferences? By the way, Photoshop provides you with dedicated GPU setting in both the performance and the 3D sections in the preferences dialog. And the setting in the preferences section, if a suitable video card is installed on your system, it will appear in the GPU setting area of the performance section. To enable GPU acceleration, make sure that the enable OpenGL drawing option is selected actually. And to fine tune the card's performance, click the advanced setting button and select basic and normal or advanced, matching the option with your requirements. And the basic uses the least amount of GPU memory to run the most basic OpenGL features when sharing the GPU with other applications or when experiencing slow responsiveness. Select this option. If you have other programs running that also use the GPU, or if you notice bad screen redraws or slower performance when using GPU accelerated features. So what about if normal? Normal is the default setting, by the way. Normal is the default setting. It uses a large amount of GPU memory to support advanced OpenGL features and should be selected if you roughly use the GPU accelerated features in Photoshop. So what about if advanced? Advanced uses the same amount of memory as the normal mode, but enables more advanced features to improve drawing performance. This setting is best when working in 3D or when working extensively with the GPU accelerated features. Note and be careful, mode changes take effect only after Photoshop is restarted. Setting in the Preferences and 3D section. The 3D section of the Performances dialog box contains a VRAM slider similar to the memory control located in the Performance section, and use the slider to determine the upper limit of the video RAM available to the Photoshop 3D engine, and the total value is a percentage of the overall VRAM available, and a setting of 100% will still reserve a portion of the overall for use with the operating system, and higher values will help with the overall 3D performance but may compete with other GPU enabled applications. Like this screenshot now, we have memory usage and available RAM and ideal range and let Photoshop use 70% only. 3D memory usage, yeah. And how to manage Scratch. Manage Scratch. A Scratch, by the way, a Scratch disk is a disk drive or SSD used for temporary storage while Photoshop is running, and Photoshop uses this space to store portions of your documents and their history, banal states that don't fit in the RAM memory, and Scratch files go into invisible operating system specified folders except for non-boot volumes on Windows as the root directory of the drive. When a non-boot drive is used as a Scratch disk, the temporary files are placed in the drive's root directory, by the way, and by default Photoshop uses the hard drive on which the operating system is installed as the primary Scratch disk. To learn more about managing Scratch disk preferences, recommended setting, and troubleshooting, see Setup Scratch disks. And see also Photoshop system requirements and optimize Photoshop performance and basic troubleshooting steps to fix most issues and troubleshoot Photoshop graphics processor, GPU and graphics driver issue, and Photoshop plugin INS troubleshooting, and Photoshop lags and freezes or runs slowly.